talking about the conflict between flesh and spirit. And these have different names, different Bible names for each of them. So the one in blue is what the Bible calls your spirit, or the new man. In Peter, he calls it the hidden man of the heart. He's writing to women about women issues, but he calls it the hidden man of the heart. It's nothing to do with gender. It just has to do with just language. And it's also called the inner man, that we be strengthened with might by his spirit in our inner man. And that's your spirit. And the voice of your spirit is called conscience. And that's where conviction takes place. Then the flesh also has a list of names. It's the word sin. Oftentimes, if you listen or watch as you're reading it, when it kind of talks about it like it's a personification, it's not talking about the individual act of sin, but a nature of sin. The NIV does a pretty good job of every time it mentions something about the fallen nature of man. The NIV calls it the sinful nature. And then we also have the old man and new man, that contrast. Paul, different times, would say, put on the new man, put off the old man. That's talking about deciding moment by moment, not a once and for all putting on or putting off. I wish it was. But it's almost like a conscious decision which part of you is going to be in charge, which part of you is going to be in dominion. And so he's saying, put off, put on. And he does that quite a bit to the Gentile believers at Ephesus and Colossae. And it's also called the carnal nature, or the sinful nature, and it's called the flesh. This also oftentimes is called heart, combined. So you say, I feel something bad in my heart, or I feel angry in my heart, or I feel like something bad is in my heart. And it's not your physical heart, it's your core being, the inner being. And there's a Native American chief one time was talking, and he says, there's two wolves inside of me. One is a good wolf, and one's a very bad wolf, very angry and a vicious wolf. And someone he was talking to said, well, which one is stronger? Which one wins the most? And he said, whichever one I feed. And I think that's profound. That if you feed your flesh, you feed that carnal nature, it gets stronger and stronger. Jesus talked about these two natures that work within us when he said, this is Matthew 26, verse 41. Remember when he told the disciples to stay and pray? They're disciples just like you. And he tells them to pray, and instead they go to sleep. And he does it like 3 times. He comes to them and tells them, you need to pray. And they go right back to sleep. And here's what Jesus said. There's no condemnation from Jesus, but he gives them an insight into what's happening. He said, your spirit is willing. And there is something inside of us. Our spirit wants to pray. Our spirit wants to read the Bible. Our spirit loves to worship. Our spirit loves to give. Your spirit wants to, but your flesh, he says, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And I used to remember reading that, oftentimes thinking, well, shouldn't it be the flesh is too strong? Like the flesh takes over the spirit. That's how I would have said it. But it's actually weak in the sense that that's the part we give into, and we give into our spirit. Or give into our flesh. Your flesh, if it could, it would sleep the life away. In the book of Proverbs, it's often talking about laziness or sloth, and it's talking about the son who sleeps during the harvest, and he ends up with nothing, comes to destruction. We all need sleep. I love sleep just as much as anyone. There's times I get tired, and Jesus got tired. So it's not tiredness, but it is possible to waste the opportunity by sleeping away your life. And the book of Proverbs points that out, that could be a problem with your flesh, that you give into your flesh too much. I wish someone had taught this to me when I was starting out. My conscience was black and blue, bruised, thinking many times that the problem with my flesh was actually my heart. It was me. That's just the way I was. And nobody really helped me to discern myself, to try to discern which part was operating. There just wasn't, I don't know why, there just wasn't much emphasis along that line when I was growing up in the Lord. And so, but I had to learn, and so the Lord taught me. And one of the ways He taught me is on my first mission trip. It's the first time. I've been pastoring maybe 7 years, something like that. And I get to do my first mission trip, which was almost a month long, going to China, to a place called Hong Kong. It was before it was part of China. And we had a family in our church who lived there. And so I was going to go visit them, kind of do my jet lag, and then from there hop to India and spend a couple weeks in India. And so that was my first trip. The enemy did several things on the way to China to kind of get me to sin. And if he could get me to yield to my flesh, it would have wrecked the whole trip, because that you're under condemnation, you're under fear, you feel like quitting, you don't feel like God's going to answer your prayer. So it would have been a wasted trip had I given in all the way along the way. There was different temptations, different issues that were happening. But the most subtle one happened one day. I was on this island in the South China Sea called Chengchao Island. And on this island, they had a retreat house for missionaries where they could go and rest. And they had arranged for me to spend a week there. And so I could walk all over the island. It was really a really nice old fishing village, and very interested in the sea and places where you can go and pray down by the ocean and that kind of thing. So that's one day I headed off to go to pray down by the ocean, and my path took me through this kind of a old business section of the village. And I saw the shop, and the shop was filled, we would call it an antique store, but it was just filled with old junk, old odds and ends, just stuff you never see here, old Chinese things. And so I was drawn by that to go into the store. I didn't have any money to buy anything, and my suitcases were filled for the month, and so, but I wanted to just see it. And so I walked in, there was a lady at the front, I said hello to her, and it's just, the whole store was about the size of this room. And so she would be over here, and I greeted her and walked, and it's just filled with stuff. And I got to the back of the store, about where you are. I got to the back of the store, there's so many shelves, she can't see me. And I get back there, and I look down, and there's a wallet. A great big fat wallet filled with money. Money was sticking out of the wallet. It looked like a Big Mac. It looked like a hamburger. Great big fat wallet filled with money. And immediately this thought came in the form of a voice inside me that said, just pick that up, keep looking, keep walking, and walk out of the store. And I froze. The thought of that shocked me, that I could think of stealing, or, like, first thing you think it's you. And so I was shocked. I waited, you're hesitant, you're shocked. And this very calm voice came and said, we don't live this way. And that other voice spoke very quickly and very fast and said, but you don't have enough money for this trip. You could always use the money. She won't know it's your wallet. Just take it and go. And again, I froze, like shocked. And this quiet voice within me very calmly said that God is looking. And the idea was that no one would see you, she wouldn't see you, but God is looking, and we live to please Him. That kind of thought, And again, first voice, right there, very aggressive, very combative, and just saying, you're a fool, take the money, no one will know. And even if you just give the money away to the poor, just give it away. Don't leave it here for someone else to get. And again, that just calm voice within inside me just said, what would you want someone to do if you lost your wallet? Do unto others as you'd have to do unto you, kind of thing. So I picked up the hamburger and went to the front, and I gave it to the lady. And then I walked out, and I felt so good. I like me when I win. I like me when you do the right thing. There's a sense of righteousness that comes. It's a joyful feeling that I won that battle. But it perplexed me. For the rest of the time, I'm thinking about what was that? You know, some people think of it as two angels, a black angel and a white angel, dark angel, light angel, on your shoulders, talking in your ear. That's the way it's been depicted, you know, in church history at different times. And I didn't think it was that, and I didn't think it was a demon. It seemed like it was all happening within inside me. And then I trembled at the thought, what if I had given in to that? I would never have been able to pray. I would never have been able to cast out demons. I would never have been able to pray for the, have confidence to pray for the sick, or confidence to preach the gospel because you feel condemned. I know what death feels like. You'd not be able to lift your face toward God. And before I left for this trip to India, my pastor sat down with me and he said, you know, he didn't think I knew, and I didn't really know, but he wanted to kind of warn me. He said, you're going to the worst place in the world. India is the worst place in the world. I said, okay, all right. He said, in India, Orissa is the worst place in India. I said, okay. He said, that's where you're going. You're going to the worst place within the worst place. He said, in Orissa, the worst place in Orissa is the Pobani district, and that's where you're going. And he was just trying to make me aware that this is not child play. This is a serious mission trip. And for me, I was thinking of going into the most difficult place, and I wouldn't have had the confidence. I might better just packed up and went home if I'd taken that wallet, because I would have lost all my confidence. And that's what the enemy was trying to do. But it wasn't a demon necessarily. It was all happening with this war in my soul between my flesh and my spirit. And later on, I could tell that nice, calm, cool, rational, spiritual, godly voice inside me is not Jesus speaking, although he can and he does, and the Holy Spirit could speak. But it was my spirit, and it was my flesh that was saying. My flesh is incredibly selfish. Jesus called the flesh self. We could add that up here. It's the word self. And the way you can discern yourself is that it's entirely selfish. It's all about you. Just take the money. Well, I won that battle, but there were others lined up for me, and it was a real fight to get in. But I never forgot that tension that created was all between my flesh and my spirit. By the way, when I turned the wallet back into the woman, I created a war in her soul. Whether or not she'd keep the money, whether or not she'd take part of the money. To me, I was free. She has her own battle. She's going to have to deal with that. So, is this helpful? There's a war in your soul between your flesh and your spirit, and it's constant. For me, it's constant.